Okay, this is the Affordable Housing Committee meeting of October 14th, Thursday night at 7 o'clock. This is Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development. Participating in this meeting are commission or committee members Joanne, Carrie, Steve, Sheila, Cindy, Helene, and Nancy. So we have a quorum. We have our recording secretary, Gretchen Gerthner, and Herb Live-Cooler from the a member of the public in attendance. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Good. Well, welcome, everyone. Let me first start out by reminding everybody, as if they need to be reminded, that next month, before our next meeting, is Election Day. Make sure you vote, number one. Number two, Mark, you and I had a quick conversation today about, as much as I enjoy these conference calls, we got to get as close to live as possible. We've got to do a Zoom or WebEx or something for future meetings, and so we will work on that between now and November 11th.
Right.
So let's go to the minutes. I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes, and then we can ask for if anybody has any proposed changes or additions. So can I get a motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve the minutes. I second it.
So who moved and who seconded?
Nancy
I
moved.
think Nancy moved and Cindy seconded.
Okay. And so I should have mentioned two things. When you say something on this call, please, again, say who you are. Gretchen's really good, but I'm not sure she remembers each one of our voices, number one. And number two, because of the format of our meeting, only members of the committee will be permitted to contribute. So we have a motion and a second on the minutes. Are there any comments, questions, or changes to the minutes? I'll take that silence as a no. I do have one proposed change. Gretchen, in the minutes, it's got a line for people who are present.
Yes.
But if any member of the committee is not in attendance, I would also like that noted.
Okay.
Okay. You don't have to do it for September, but going forward, if we can keep track of that as well.
Okay. I think everybody was in attendance.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay. Good.
It looks like it to me. Yes. Okay. Good. Takes care of the minutes.
Well, did everyone vote to approve it?
Oh,
I didn't hear an actual
okay.
vote.
So all those, we'll try and do it by acclamation rather than a roll call. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Unanimous. Okay. We'll move on to the Quincy Street home purchase.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think everyone may be aware of the fact that we managed to make it all the way through the process, and the RTM did unanimously approve the acquisition of Quincy Street as recommended by this committee. It also received unanimous support from the Planning and Zoning Commission pursuant to 8-24, a mandatory referral for their review for any acquisition of town property. And we also received unanimous support from the Board of Selectmen. So a clean sweep. I've had both before and during this process and subsequent to the approvals, conversations with several of the abutting property owners, and I sense there is a real opportunity for us to finally acquire a significant number of adjoining lots in fairly short order that we can aggregate and use as part of the first phase of a redevelopment of the Parkview Commons property to address, the long-standing FEMA flood compliance issues, to preserve this as affordable housing. But in doing so, I think there's also an opportunity that we might be able to add additional affordable units there as well. It's in order to put together 5 or 6 lots, we would need at least $1.5 million, which obviously is not something that we have sitting in the bank as far as the Housing Trust Fund is concerned. And so, the idea would be, how can we develop a mechanism by which we can finance the purchase of these properties and subsequently the development, using Housing Trust Fund monies, or leveraging housing monies in the Housing Trust Fund to do that. So, to put it in perspective, if the town were to borrow money at its normal borrowing rate and finance it, we could be, a $1.5 million note at 2.5% interest over a 20-year term is $8,000 a month principal and interest payment. So, it is conceivable that we could use the Housing Trust Fund money in that fashion. We'd obviously need to borrow some additional dollars to do the development. So the question really becomes whether we self-finance it internally or whether we go outside with an external lender. I've had conversations with CDFI lenders, and certainly they're willing to provide financing to us. But obviously the terms that they would provide the money, even very favorable terms, is probably not as cheap a cost as what the town could do on its own. So I'm having a conversation next week with the Chief of Staff and Chief Administrative Officer and Chief Fiscal Officer to talk about next steps, because it seems to me there's two potential paths here. One is we could finance it internally using our capacity, and Housing Trust Fund money would certainly help in terms of providing support for that effort. And the other option would be to go outside, and in that case, it would seem to me that it would make more sense to, at this point, identify a development partner who would help do the aggregation of the lots and identify financing and put together the financing plan, all that, which is similar to the approach that we had embarked on several years back. There's pluses and minuses to each approach. Either way, I think in the end, what I told Board of Selectmen, RTM, and certainly in our conversations, I don't think the town would be acting as the developer of this property. We would look to identify and bring on board a development partner to actually do the development. It's just a question of when best to do that and what we're asking that development partner to do. So the town, what it brings to the table is the ability to obtain site control, because the town or another income-eligible homeowner or purchaser is the only two entities that can acquire these properties. And then the second thing would be to ensure permitting for the project. So again, it was helpful to go through this process because I think all the boards had an opportunity to understand what the overall intent is. A lot of questions, obviously, in terms of the nitty-gritty of the development deal. But I think, from the planning and zoning perspective, they certainly were supportive of what we were trying to accomplish here, which augurs well for eventual site plan application that we would have to make. So I do think there's a good opportunity to do this. What we basically have is 15 months to put together a plan that makes sense for all parties, and if we're able to do that, great. We're on our way, and if we're not, then the exit strategy at this point is just put the property that we are in the process of acquiring back on the market to another income-eligible purchaser. So we haven't closed yet on 350 Quincy Street. We anticipate closing by the end of this month. And then, she's going to remain on premises, paying rent, maintaining the property for a period of time until she closes up her affairs locally. And, that money will go back into the Housing Trust Fund, will help offset some of the cost initially. But we'll have to use these next 15 months wisely, which will go by quickly, to figure out if we can actually put something together that will work financially and in every other way. So thank you very much for your support. Appreciate it. You guys kicked this off on this road. We've been talking about this for a long time, so I'm happy that we've at least taken this first step. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mark. I've got some questions, but I would like the committee members to ask their questions first.
Okay, I had one question, at least to start with, is Carrie. How many of the neighboring property owners were interested? Did you get a sort of feeling for that at all?
Yeah, I think I have positive responses from 4 to 5 property owners right now.
Yeah, that's great. And how many are there? I'm sorry, how many are there total there? I mean, if it's 4 to 5, how many?
Yeah, well, so
excuse me, is that Sheila?
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's Cindy. I'm sorry.
Cindy. Okay. Yeah.
The development encompasses 22 single-family deed-restricted home ownership units, but I'd always thought that having 5 lots to start with a minimum acreage of an acre or more made the most sense. And the trick is obviously getting 5 that are contiguous to one another.
That's what I was
and here we have
you could get
here we have 5 that are
that.
contiguous to one another. Yep.
Jackpot.
Yeah, I have 5 that are contiguous, and and I've got several that are chomping at the bit that would sell me their unit tomorrow if I had the money.
That's great.
But I think it's again, the idea was not to basically take money from the Housing Trust Fund and buy it. It was we had to do it in this instance to kind of get it started. But the plan was to try to leverage that money and to finance it somehow. So I still think that is the most that's really the only way it's going to happen. It's just a question of whether we decide to do it ourselves or whether we work with another party to help us put that financing in place.
Mark, this is Nancy. I have a quick question. For the money for the Quincy Street to come out of the Housing Trust Fund, are they going to go through some kind of a process to request that?
No, it would. If we to use the Housing Trust Fund money for this or any other purpose, it requires the approval of this committee and the Board of Selectmen. And so, you consented to use $295 to purchase this 350 Quincy. I think that was with the understanding that we would be looking to recapitalize that as part of a larger project. And certainly that's my intent, but we don't have a commitment there yet.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so this is Steve. I'll ask a couple of questions. Mark, the price again was $295, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And who exactly is going to own it in the interim? The town
it'll be owned by the town. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. did you make reference to a 15-month period?
Yes. Well, through basically the end of next year, December 31st of 2021.
And I'm sorry I missed it. What is what's the significance of that 15-month period?
Well, we had a holdover tenant that wanted it at least as much as 15 months to button up her affairs locally. So, and realistically, it's probably going to take us 12 to 15 months to put together a development deal for this. It's actually moved a little quicker in terms of, people's interest in selling their lots. But
okay, no, I understand.
That was the thought.
So as we started down this road, before you came to us, or before you went to the selectmen, did anybody talk to the RTM members who represent that area?
I did, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That's always
in terms of timing, Steve, I talked to them subsequent to our, the committee's action on this. But before I went to the RTM, I called each of the RTM district members as well as members of the leadership team to make sure that they understood what we were trying to do and answer any questions they had. Having had a lot of questions from Selectman Flynn, I wanted to make sure I didn't repeat that mistake before 40 members of the RTM.
And as to financing of a larger project, because it's in a floodplain, it's difficult to get state assistance. I know that they can do it if they want to. They could grant an exemption.
Yep. We're gonna try. Yeah. I certainly have talked to a couple people who suggested I try again. So I will definitely not leave that stone unturned.
And as you referenced the CDFIs, I'm sure there's several banks that would be more than happy. They get CRA points, and this is we're a great town. This is a good project. But the Housing Authority can also bond developments.
And I've talked to Carol. So Carol's got a couple things on her plate that may limit her borrowing capacity, but they might be a potential partner as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Mark, this is Joanne.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Joanne.
Are you finished, Steve? If not, I'll wait.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm done, Joanne. Go ahead.
I have a question on purchasing these other properties. Do we have a grants writer?
Well, not per se. All departments kind of do their own grant writing. So I've written my share of grant applications before.
I'm very much interested, and I've done this before. Have we applied for any private foundation grants to do this with?
We've had some conversations with them. There haven't been a complete alignment of goals here. So I think it's still worth pursuing. I agree with you. Yeah.
I'll send you the list that I have, because I think private foundations right now are looking to fund affordable housing in many of the different municipalities.
Okay. I'll take it.
You have to have a good grant writer. You have to have somebody that absolutely, and I would say you yourself would be probably the one that knows the most about it, that actually can dig into what they're actually looking for and what's available. If I send you the links of the people that I've worked with before.
Please do. That sounds great.
Okay. Because I think that would be a way to go about it. That would save us on bank loans and other types of things, funding for these places.
And two, I think you guys all know that to the extent to which we're able to leverage, those external sources like private foundations or state grants, that would help us meet our affordability goals and not have to rely upon basically market rate units subsidizing the others. So we could we could create more affordable
Absolutely.
units if we're getting subsidy from some other source, from a grant source, for example.
Yeah, there's quite a few that are actually, because the affordable housing is such a big topic right now, they are offering on different levels. So
Awesome.
I think it'd be something we would want to look into.
I think it's a good idea. It also helps to build support. And so if we didn't get big dollars,
it also keeps our ratings down, so that we're not getting hit with over market rate costs and everything.
Yep.
So there are opportunities and some challenges with this development, but I'm hoping that if we work together, we can get a plan together. And so, Mark, if there's anything that I or the committee can do to facilitate, please let us know.
I will definitely do that.
I'll be happy to
Thank
give
you,
you the
Steve.
grants that I know about. So.
And Helene, I want
Hi.
to pick your brain a little bit on the residential real estate side. So.
Sure. Pick away.
Hey, Mark, it's Sheila.
Hey, Sheila.
Could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So does the town retain ownership of the property if we work with a nonprofit developer or any developer?
Yeah, I think we haven't obviously agreed to whatever terms they might be, but I think the plan would be for the town to retain ownership of the underlying property, basically land bank it. It could pass to another entity, I suppose, provided our goals were aligned otherwise. Our goal is really to ensure that these units are basically affordable in perpetuity and that they're sustainable for the long haul. So I suppose we might be able to find a nonprofit entity that would have a similar goal and be in a better position to maintain the property, such as it is. But I think for the time being, I was thinking it would be more like Nordstrom and Greenfield with those condos over there, where the town owns the property underneath.
Yeah. So they would remain a homeowner versus a rental?
Yes. Yeah. I think the intent here is to keep this as affordable home ownership, but probably transition this into where it's a more of a condominium type arrangement, because we're probably going to end up having to do a 3-for-1 replacement to make the deal work financially.
Yeah,
well,
I think that's wonderful.
Whoever holds the deed to the property is technically the owner.
Mm-hmm.
So who's
well,
the deed?
For now, I guess Sheila was asking long term. There could be a scenario, I guess, where you might pass that through to another development partner, but I think you would have to have some assurance that your goals would be completely in line,
Yeah.
and there'd be protections to make sure that you meet your objective along the way. But I think right now we're just anticipating the town owns the property underneath.
Yeah, no, and I would agree that would be the best thing to do. And it's great to get in there and bring these properties to the a place where they are livable and protected. So I'm thrilled with that. I'm happy that people are willing. I'm kind of curious why they want to get out, but I know it's mostly probably because of the cost, to themselves and the zone in the flood insurance and the long-term issues. Would you consider do you have a cost on, from acquisition to elevation to new building? Do you have a unit of estimate on any of that? Because that's That's gotta be what?
Yeah, what we were talking about originally, again, I have the benefit of having worked with a development partner a few years back, and we put together a development budget pro forma, whole plan. And obviously it needs to be updated, but there's some costs that they would incur that we might not incur if we were doing the work ourselves. But round numbers, we're talking about a $5 million development project here, which includes acquisition, soft and hard costs. No.
Would that be the 22 units, or would that be 5 units?
No, that would be 5 units, yeah. That would be initial. And the idea is, obviously, you have to have $5 million coming back to take you out. So, it's all a question of how many units and what your sale price is, and to the extent to which, as Joanne brought up, if you have other sources of funding, that would help.
Yes, to subsidize it. So. Speaking of Cdbg Acquisition.
Yeah, I would anticipate that we might use Cdbg as part of the revenue stack. There's not a lot. We don't. I'm sure it's close to Milford. We don't get a lot of money from Cdbg. It's about $500,000 per. So, but you're going to have demolition and site costs that are certainly eligible under Cdbg, as well as acquisition. You can't use it for new housing construction. So, but there are other things.
And to that point, it subsidizes the overall cost, and therefore we borrow less or we give up less in a partnership. I'm a big fan of Cdbg and other grants. I'm with Joanne on that. So is the intent to use all of the housing trust fund?
No.
The balance?
I hope not, but in any event, we'll have to come back to the Affordable Housing Committee and present a plan that you guys would have to review and decide if it makes sense.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Nice job.
Okay. Let us move on. Discussion of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And Mark, you're up first. The funds available are
$810,000. Not a lot of change from last. I think it's $10,000 more from month to month.
So I'm curious as to why. We've been averaging 35, 40,000
I can tell you why.
A month. COVID?
Yeah. There's no construction. Certainly not there's still building permit activity, obviously, but it's a much different nature than before. There's no major commercial building activity at the present time, nor is there major institutional projects through the universities either at the present time. So what you have is some smaller, residential home construction and, some additions, but that's pretty much it. There's very little commercial activity right now.
Well, Mark, do you recall what we had estimated when we were first talking about the trust fund? We did an estimate of how much we might get. And do you recall what that was? Because we're going to need like an actuarial or a projection of funding if you're going to be using trust fund money, let's say, to help pay a mortgage or to pay back. So we need to know what we expect to get on really basically a monthly basis.
Yeah, no question. And I think, we had initially forecast based on previous building activity anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000 per year. So we're within that ballpark. If you take that, what we have currently in the account, and you average it over the period of time, we're still in that $30,000 to $35,000 a month range. And really, I think what we're talking about here, Steve, as you know, when you structure these things, you're talking about short-term financing and long-term financing needs, and you have sale proceeds that are coming in. So you're really financing it for a very short period of time. You may be stretching it out. The term may be favorable, but you have a lot of that has to be worked out yet in terms of that. But I don't. When I talk to several members of the Board of Selectmen RTM, at the end of the day, while we may come up with a plan whereby the Housing Trust Fund money is tapped to pay principal and interest or interest only on a note for a period of time to provide financing, if for some reason we don't come up with the money or we fall short, it's the town's full faith and credit. We're not planning to issue revenue bonds. We'll probably be doing general obligation debt or notes backed by the town's full faith and credit under that scenario. So, I think your point is well taken. We do need to do that analysis, but we're also looking at financing it over for a very short period of time while we do the development, and then taking it out through sale proceeds and whatever long-term financing we may need.
Can I ask you to, I don't know who keeps track of our money, but if somebody could just give us like a spreadsheet that just shows how much we've got on a monthly basis. It's been, I think, almost 24 months, maybe 23 months. And whoever's the keeper of the funds has to know how much has been added each month.
Well, since I've been reporting on it monthly, you probably have a pretty good record based on the minutes of these meetings. So I guess I could do that.
Well, that would be fine too. Yep. Okay. So we've got 810. We're going to be down 300,000 shortly. It still leaves us 510. Leaves us lots of funds that we can do good things with, which leads us into Sheila's. Sheila, I'm hoping you can lead us to a discussion of the solicit review of the proposals and disperse the funds.
Sure. Thanks for some comments that I did receive. I did get some comments from Mark today. I don't know if you saw that, my reply, Mark. Thank you for those. I think what I would say is, and Carrie as well, I think what I would say is that there's probably a little bit more in here that we could push off to a application, or we could make this the application and add back in the financing request that will come. But I kind of shy away from that. But it is quite long now. So to that point, one of the reasons it's long is, or encompasses some, probably more than you expected or more than the original one-pager, is once the one-pager doesn't talk at all about the goals and purpose. So even though that front portion needs to be rewritten a little bit, and Mark pointed out I didn't quite get the HTF and the inclusionary zoning specifics, so I'll make amends to that as well. But there's the instructions. People need to know what's expected of them. So it kind of just adds in, Some of the other information is for bigger companies, or a company. So more information from a company standpoint needed. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Mark brought up a question that in his comments to me, saying that he was not aware or hadn't thought of the HTF as being used by homeowners. And I do remember we discussed using it for ADUs, people who wanted to build or renovate an ADU. Am I correct in that? Because that's why I kind of added a homeowner to the whole to the pre-application as an option.
Stephen,
I
think that's a viable option.
I do too.
Yeah, I think this is Cindy. I think we did speak about that, which brings me to my question about Section 4. If a homeowner wants to come in and, say, take a loan for $20,000, where do they fall in that? You have 10 years, 40 years, and 90 years for the deed restriction, and then you list specific amounts related to those specific years. And I kind of think that.
Tell me your question again.
I'm
now on the section.
It's Section 4. So you say 10-year grant for $10,000. What if someone wants $15,000? Where does that make them? I just think it's too restrictive. I think with this specific area, we need to be more less restrictive, and we need to say, okay, let's see what a specific person is asking for. Let's see what their what their requirements are. What if someone wants to leave in 5 years? Are you going to make them pay that money back?
So that section is not a done deal. It's kind of a guideline. I think you have to, if you're going to grant money outright, you have to have a guideline.
Well, if we need a guideline,
you do, but I just think that the way that it's laid out is very restrictive. And I think anyone who's going to look at this, especially a homeowner who may want money for an ADU, is going to look at this and be, really concerned about it and just say, forget it, I'm not going to do it.
So if they came in and asked for $15,000 and the project warranted it, the question is, how much money do we have? How many proposals do you have in the queue? Those are the upfront things. How can we provide them with more money? Does the project warrant it? So I would say, certainly that section could include, these are, guidelines, and depending on the project, we might consider more. My question to you is, why don't you send us something, both Helene and Nancy and I, so that we can see what maybe you're looking at in writing? Would that be something you could do?
Yeah, I think this needs to be a discussion for the committee. I would hope that this would be more open-ended, and it would be flexible depending on who was applying for this. So I think any, allocation like this shouldn't really be in there, and it should be something based on, every individual who comes to us. I mean, you could have a developer come to us and they would have one standard. You can have a homeowner who has another standard. I mean, I had a woman that I spoke to last week or 2 weeks ago who has an ADU, spoke to them about possible deed restriction, and her main concern was, what happens if I sell this in 5 years? I mean, there's a lot of, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be worried about that. And I think,
well, of course, yeah,
needs to be really more open-ended.
Can I say something? I'm sort of the ADU, since I'm sort of, involved in the ADU thing, we're way ahead of ourselves with even talking about an application until these adjusted amendments, get adopted, hopefully, at the upcoming P&Z thing. But what's missing here is a story, a kind of a story, a 2-page story in plain English about who we are, what we're trying to do, and here are some things and ideas you can consider. When I looked at the application, it was like, oh, my God, I could never fill this out. And it was very scary. And I think we really have to simplify things and put a lot of things in much more plain English, at least for homeowners, if and when we get to it. But I think it's too soon to be doing anything besides writing a storyline right now.
Well, I agree. It could be friendlier.
Accessory dwelling units. But we're doing more than that, Carrie.
Okay, I'm talking about accessory dwelling units, so we can kind of
put it could be, this is Cindy. I mean, what if we spoke to someone who was a senior who, we found from Fairfield Senior Advocates who said, they would like some work done on their house and they would deed restrict and they would do something. We've had those discussions before about there's so many different ways that the trust fund could be used. And I just think that we kind of need to be more open-ended and, it really kind of depends on what type of project that the trust fund is going to be funding and what type of individual that we're dealing with. So I just think to be more open-ended gives us more flexibility.
Okay, well,
and
open-ended is great.
The money.
Open-ended is great, but transparency is really important. Okay, this is almost like public money, So
a guideline. Transparency is completely different from being open-ended. I mean, of course, someone's going to have to fill out the application and give all their information, but the way that we use the money,
they're going to want to know what is required of them in order to receive money. They're going to want to know up front kind of the guideline, and so it could be very easy to write in there that these are guidelines. This is a minimum. And if the project warrants, the committee will consider more or less. But that really does tie to the more money you give doesn't necessarily mean you only ask for 10 years of a deed restriction either. So that's kind of where that 10 years came from. Let me ask you a question. Would you be willing? I mean, I don't think anybody would be willing to put a deed restriction of 10 years on their house for less than $10,000, right?
What if they want it for 5 years?
I think it would need to be significantly more, even.
I mean, you could do any time, but I just think that restricting it to 10 years, 40 years, and 99 years, I just think people are going to look at that and they're going to put it in a box, and they're going to say,
we need the 10 years.
What I'm doing.
So if you want to add to the moratorium, if you want to add affordable units to the moratorium for the town, which is one of the missions, you have to at least have 10 years on an ADU. You have to at least have 40 years.
If I may, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that it's very clear that an ADU with a deed restriction for 10 years is considered affordable housing as far as the state is concerned. It is still an open question as to whether a 10-year deed restriction on an ADU unit would count towards our moratorium points, and that's the matter that I've referred to the town attorney. There is some dispute as to the language. As much as I find it incongruous to have one section of the statute saying an ADU with a 10-year restriction does count as affordable housing, and in the next breath it doesn't count towards a moratorium. There are other examples in the statutes where you have a deed-restricted affordable unit, but because it was built before 1990, it doesn't count towards a moratorium. So this does need to be clarified. My only other point with the home ownership thing is we currently have programs to provide funding assistance to homeowners to do work on their residence, funded through Cdbg, for which we would ask for a deed restriction of some sort or the other. And
you would?
I think yes.
Oh, really?
It does count as our. It essentially is there so long as the property is owned by them, and we include that in our affordable housing inventory. It does not count towards any moratorium points because it doesn't have a term associated with it, and it ceases to exist upon sale. But it's essentially a repayment, and the state does consider that part of the affordable housing inventory of the town.
Because the funding is from HUD?
Because of the funding.
Oh, I never knew that.
Be that as it may, so that was my only point with the home ownership is that we do have other programs that we do provide funding for, and I didn't want to necessarily suggest that we should compete for limited scarce dollars and provide housing trust fund monies for that purpose if we have another funding source for that purpose.
Well,
I think
your program,
the broader issue with the ADUs is that we do need to. I guess what I would say with regard to ADUs, to Carrie's point, if at the end of the day the Affordable Housing Committee decides that it would like to set up a program to help finance the creation of accessory dwelling units using housing trust fund monies, it probably makes more sense to do that as a separate program than have a single application that deals with for-profit, nonprofit developers that are looking at bigger projects perhaps. And the one thing I want you to bear in mind is that approval of use of housing trust fund monies doesn't require the approval of this body and the Board of Selectmen. So I don't know if I'd want to take each individual homeowner through that process. It's a little different story when you're talking about a bigger development project. It would make more sense to me to have the Affordable Housing Committee develop a plan around ADUs, so they're going to tap the housing trust fund money for that, and have the Board of Selectmen approve the program, rather than have each individual application go through that process. That was
Mark, if we did that and we approved the program, then we could allow your office to do the individual homeowner part of it. Correct?
Well,
so, we would probably take
Mark,
the
that's
application.
really interjecting a lot of information that we weren't prepared to hear tonight. I'll be honest with you. It's a little, you're confusing the issue. I get what you're saying. Let me just go back to the 10 years. Whether the deed restriction is included in a moratorium or after a moratorium, because we still, once you get a moratorium, folks, you have 3 years to add to that list, and deeds expire. So every deed that is added on through the years, whatever point in time, it will count towards keeping a moratorium. That's something that isn't talked about a lot. The idea that we're CDBG is going to provide an outright grant to somebody, is that what you're saying? You're not going to ask your applicants, Mark, to pitch in or put towards, I don't know, what is a quarter you ask them to pay for, or half of the project? You're not going to ask for that? Because nobody's going to deed restrict their house if they have to actually.
We provide a 60-40 split on owner-occupied, and we do a declining balance loan in exchange for a deed restriction on non-owner-occupied. It hasn't changed since when you were in the office.
Do you get many of those?
Many what?
Do you get many of those 100% projects?
Under
multifamily?
Non-owner occupied?
Yeah.
We do very few.
Yeah.
Mainly because people don't want to deed restrict their units for 20 years, let alone 40 years. Right.
And so the 10 years is palpable if with the price
that's for an
right.
ADU.
Well, we could have that conversation. That's just a reality. All of this will only work if the circumstances and the person, come into play at the same time. So you can't, if you don't have an application to provide to anybody, then there's no opportunity for the circumstances and the stars to align. That's my, take on whether I'm at work or whether I'm looking at this. I think we can be more flexible, but I think you have to have guidelines. People want to know what they have to work with. And if as long as it's written in there that says, again, the committee will, project determined, will look at it and may make changes, may offer more, however we want to put it. But if the point is to add to the affordable housing stock through a deed restriction, then we have to make that information known. So that's what Section 4 is. And it's not written in stone. 99 years for two, that doesn't even have to be in there. We don't even have to say that.
No, I first of all, thank you for taking the time to do all this. I really think you did a great job, but I just think it just needs to be a little bit more flexible because you don't know who's going to come to us and ask it. And I just think it was a little, people may be a little intimidated by that.
Yeah, I understand. And I think Carrie's right. If somebody wants to work on the story part and we plug it into the top, or it's a cover letter, all of this has to come with written document. You have to correspond, and
I just think people know that it's flexible. That
Yes.
It's,
I agree. So that's why
we did this.
Sorry, let me just interject, Steve. That we've got 10 more minutes. We've got 10 more minutes, so that's all. Just wanted to remind you.
How about you, Steve? What do you think?
Well, my initial thought was that maybe it was a bit more than what we needed, but my second thought was, Sheila, that it might be good to ask all of these kinds of questions up front because we will then see who we're dealing with. If somebody can only check 2 of the boxes and get lost on everything else, then we know that if we're going to continue to deal with them, we're going to have to do a lot of hand-holding. If someone can come in with 5 pages completely filled out, then we know that probably their project or development is going to go more smoothly.
I agree.
But on the pre-app, though, I would probably not include Section 4 or 5.
Okay. But we would allude to it, as Mark had pointed out in his comments. You have to, at the bottom, there could be additional information. This is what will be required. Should the committee accept your pre-application and provide you with an application? These are the next steps. So that was fully going to be that part of that portion would be filled out, and provided so that they have an inkling of what is the next step. But to your point, if somebody comes in and it's a homeowner, I'm willing to sit down with anybody and help them through and help them understand it. I don't expect Mark and his office to do it, Mark. I don't. I think a subcommittee can do that. I'd be willing to do that. And Carrie, you're the perfect person to help some homeowners through some of the information. I prefer one application.
The point that we're saying I'm the perfect person to help some homeowners through indicates that we really need more help in the office, or else as a separate consultant, which is the next couple of questions on the agenda, what we want to do. There is more work here that needs to be done. The only way communities have succeeded with ADUs, and we heard this from Ridgefield the other day, it was a huge amount of public relations and media and hand-holding and all of the above. People think, I'd like to have an ADU, but unless they walk through their property with an architect or a planner or a civil engineer or somebody who can at least, there's so many things covered in that. It's a big deal unless you're doing it in your house. And once you start getting into an additions and all of that, you have to conform with setbacks, with coverage, with wetlands, all of this stuff. And there are people who can do that, but it's more than just, it's something I could do. I mean, I have this, I can do it because I've done it for years, but it's nothing that I'd like to see somebody in that office or as a consultant who is available to do that we actually pay for money for somebody to do that from Housing Trust Fund. It's a reasonable expense.
Well, I don't know.
I'm sorry. Let me interject and ask Mark about this. Mark, you had suggested that we get approval for a program, maybe with $1 cap on it. But then what? What's the second step in that?
I'm just suggesting you have a bifurcation. I don't think it would be that difficult for our office to process these applications. We already work with homeowners looking to do work to their houses. So I don't know. It obviously depends on the volume if we're suddenly overwhelmed with 100 applications.
No, you're not.
We certainly don't have the capacity to do that. But at the current pace, where we have, maybe we're working with one or two homeowners and originating, half a dozen to 10 over the course of a year, that's certainly a manageable workload.
Yeah,
and
but
I think
that's the application
really
part.
But I think that's even the starting place for a homeowner to come in and say, look, I like the idea of an ADU. In a way, I almost don't want to have this conversation until after next month, but I like the idea of an ADU, but I don't know quite how to get started. I'm thinking I'd like to put an addition on, and I'd like to do this. What do you think? They need that hand-holding. As you said, Sheila, somebody needs to hold their hand through the process. And,
so
it's the way things are.
They can, so to your point, an accessory apartment is much smaller, doesn't require that as much expertise. The planning and zoning office and the building department are very helpful. I don't know that we need to set up services for people to quite frankly, expand their home and benefit from it. I'm not sure if that's what you really mean, but on the other hand, if it's a large expansion or maybe a detached and they have to get some expertise, that's up to them. That's part of the deal.
That is part of the deal, and they will need that expertise. But even knowing that that's what they should do, get a person who can help them with that, or that these people exist and who they are. I mean, some people have no idea about any of this.
So when they come in and they tell us, who's your contractor? Because that's what this application asks from a homeowner. If they've hired a contractor, if they've hired an architect, we can at least look at that. I mean, we could personally look in to see what what the
okay. Sheila, I'm sorry.
References
are. That we've got about 5 more minutes, and I think that, as Mark had said, or maybe Carrie earlier on, that the ADU regs have not been discussed at TP&Z. They've not been amended yet, so I don't think we should spend much more time talking about that for this.
Well, this is accessory apartments as well. And just for a point of interest, Mark won't, in his program, he is not advising people on contracts and how to construct and who to contact. Part of that program is the homeowner actually does that legwork themselves.
And, I hope that some of the trust fund dollars are used for development, 10 units here and 20 units there, maybe a series of 5-unit things with Operation Hope. I do hope that some homeowners, some individuals can make use of it, but I'd like to think that we can leverage and get some real units out of it, not just one or two at a time.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, maybe that's what we should think about, is not even putting ADUs on this at this time, or accessory apartments. And that could be a CDBG, program if people wanted to use those funds. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I personally think that we can include them. There's a whole range of housing types that we can work with. And it can go from single family to 2, 3, 4 family units to larger stuff.
Yeah. And it really, it will actually take some commitment by, the committee or certain members, whoever wants to do that, to carry some of the load, to help these applicants and look at the applications and present them to the committee. It was never my thought that Mark would be solely responsible for reviewing all of these either. That seems kind of like a dump to me. And so just as an FYI, that was not what I envisioned. But it's all good information, and it's pertinent if you want to know about affordable housing. These are the points that have to be looked at.
all have to be known. So anyway, thank you for your comments. Yes, and I will put some information together and rearrange and see if Nancy and Helene can get together and we can hash it out. Okay.
Good. I would also suggest that we give the application to some people in the field to review. Carol Martin would be a good person. The woman from Operation Hope. Maybe there's a smaller developer.
How about Bridgeport Neighborhood Trust? I have a contact there I work with a lot. I was thinking about involving her. I think that's a great idea. I was also thinking maybe having, somebody like Bridgeport Neighborhood Trust come in and talk to us as and we can run some questions by her or whoever else. She's local. They're local, so it's just easier.
Just FYI, I'm on the board of Bridgeport Neighborhood Trust, and I think that possibly they could help. Liz Torres, who used to be the CEO, is no longer, but she's also a really good person, and to look at something like this. And so I would add her to the list. First of all, I think she'd be very happy to take a look at it, and she could give us some really good comments, I think.
Okay. Well, why don't you and I talk about that once we have something, we shape it up a little bit, and I can provide you with, we could look at, move some information into an application and get it out of the pre-app.
Good.
I'll work on the story. I'll work on the story.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
One of the goals was to, to consider and act upon the proposal, but I think the pre-app, we need to do a little bit more, and so I suggest that we put that down for next month.
Yeah, thanks. I agree.
Okay. So let's then move on to the discussion about the affordable dwelling units. And I'm sorry, before we do that, Carrie, you're gonna work on the story?
Yeah, I'm gonna work on the story.
Okay. And Sheila, I'll also send you a few of my comments in writing, and maybe there's going to be a meeting next week, right? Or 2 weeks from now. So.
Well, let's talk about the ADUs first.
Yeah.
And there may be a meeting to help prepare for that.
Okay.
All right. Should we start about that? All right. As far as I know, from what Mark has told me, the Town Plan and Zoning Commission would now like us to appear in front of them October 27th, and I haven't heard anything different, so I don't know. I don't know if they closed the hearing last night on Beach Road, and we'll make a decision on that meeting, but that doesn't matter. If they want us to appear on the 27th, we can appear on the 27th. So with that in mind, I have started putting together the PowerPoint presentation that would be part of it, based on I don't know if I sent it to everybody or just some of you. I don't know that I heard from everybody or anybody, actually. I sent a brief outline of what I was going to do, and so I'm working off that, and of course it's changing as I go along. And then I would like to have a meeting sometime next week with a few people from the committee, and I'm thinking Steve and Cindy, because I had them down as possible speakers, and with Herb, if he's available, from FSA, and perhaps Mary Hogue, if she's available, because they represent Fair Plan, who is also part of the group that's pulled this together. And
excuse
also,
me, Carrie, let me just ask, 3 people from the committee are permitted to meet, correct, Mark? 3
correct.
can meet, not 4.
3 can,
okay.
Yeah, 3 can meet, just like Helene and Sheila and Nancy have been meeting.
Yeah, okay.
3 can meet. Okay.
Fine.
Yeah, and to try, and by that point I hope to have a first draft of the presentation pulled together so that they can pull it apart, and then we'll go from there. And one question I have, Mark, is it possible at this point, I know you've submitted the application to TPZ, can minor revisions be made to the application language if we come up with something?
It's a public hearing.
If you like,
right.
I don't know why that would be necessary, but let's cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yeah, okay. It would be very minor, and it would just be, if we can cross that bridge. So that's where I am with all of that, and I'm planning it'll be about a 20-minute presentation in front of them, followed by questions. And I am hoping it will be approved. I doubt if it will be approved that night. I think there will be several questions. But I think we're at a point in time where there will be a more favorable reception than there was in 2009 when this application was last before them. And I think, in a way, COVID has a lot to do with it. And the increasing cost of housing and the everything that's going on right now.
Let me just add on to that, Carrie. I didn't think about COVID, but I can see where that would really generate a lot of interest. If we'd had this up and running 3 months ago, because people are back with their parents. Parents are back with their kids.
This is all the thing that's driving it now. And Helene, maybe as a real estate agent, what are people coming in and asking about this type of thing? We're looking for accessory apartments. I've seen some notices in the paper, reports in the paper from other real estate agents saying, people want to find, they want that. And I'm wondering if you've seen that in your practice.
I guess not.
I guess not. Okay. Okay, I guess not.
I'm kidding. She probably has.
I think there is going to be a lot of interest in accessory apartments, and it's going to be for people who want to put parents in an accessory apartment, for people who want to put their older kids in an accessory apartment if they're home now and working, and also for people who would probably use them part-time, at least for home offices. And the interesting thing is that we are writing the language in a way, because it's FSA, we have to somehow make the point, and this may be a little bit hard to do, which is that accessory apartments, we are looking for accessory apartments for two purposes. One, to increase the supply of deed-restricted affordable housing units, apartments, whatever. And the other is to increase the supply of what's called naturally occurring affordable housing, which is, just a cottage that somebody's going to rent for $1,300 or $1,400, and it's going to be naturally affordable for what people can afford in this area. So that's kind of the key point to get across, almost.
Yeah, Carrie, the way I look at it, and Stephen, this is my philosophy, is that we need affordable housing, and we need as many different types of affordable housing in town. If we get some moratorium points, that's great. But if we don't get the points, it's still
great.
Something we're supposed to be doing, affordable housing.
Yes.
And across the board, many different types.
Many different types, naturally occurring affordable housing, and that's what we don't have anymore, because all those little ranches and capes or small lots are sort of being torn down. So, yes, I agree totally.
And you mentioned a 20-minute presentation. Did somebody tell you 20 minutes?
No, I told myself that.
And Mark, what do you think?
Longer.
Is that too long, too short? To me, that seems a little long because we're not building the building.
I think what I've explained to Carrie, what I think would be best is we briefly touch upon what the overall intent of our proposed changes are, what's the goal, and then I think Carrie needs to spend time walking the commission through each of the proposed changes and why we're proposing the change, to explain the rationale behind it. And if that takes 15 minutes or 20 minutes or a half hour, I think that's time well spent. I don't know that we have to, just do a filibuster or go into any length with a giant oration or something like that. But I do think we need to touch on those points, and it takes whatever it takes.
One of the things I start with, Mark, is kind of an explanation of what accessory dwelling units are, because just to be sure everybody's on the same page. I'm sure they all know right now, but I think it's important.
I think you want to make sure that everyone understands what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is Steve. I agree that those are really good topics that we have to touch on, Mark. I want to make sure that we don't take too much time, but we got to make sure we cover the material. And also a question, I don't know if I sent to everybody the accessory dwelling unit pamphlet from Ridgefield or not.
You did.
Yes.
You did? Okay, good. I thought that was good, and after we're successful in changing the regs, maybe we'll steal some of their ideas and put out our own little pamphlet.
I think that's a great idea. I think, Carrie, you all spoke about that, the Fairfield Senior Advocates. Weren't you all proposed to put together a brochure?
Yeah, but I'm not going to do it until we're done with this. I mean,
So let me ask you to clarify. Now, accessory apartments aren't. They're not well known, are they? Why
here's
wouldn't
the deal.
why wouldn't they both speak to it? Why wouldn't people be helped with both?
They are all the term that's now in use for all of these is accessory dwelling units, whether they're in the house and attached, or whether they're freestanding, or above a garage, or whatever they are. They're all called accessory dwelling units. That's sort of the term that's become used. And in the presentation I'm writing, I say that. But in our current regs, what we say are accessory apartments, because it only speaks about, apartments within a house. And the interesting thing is, if it's going to be considered under 830G, it has to be within the house and no bigger than 30%, and a couple of other things that we don't have in our regs at all. So that's kind of where it gets a little tricky, shall we say. So we'll work on that.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're going to ask them to actually change the name of the reg, too.
Well, I hadn't so far, because when we got started with this, I wasn't proposing anything that was unattached, and then we decided we were going to put in a paragraph about freestanding units. So I think we probably should propose changing that,
the terminology altogether.
The terminology
would make more sense than trying to refer to it.
Everybody is using ADUs right now. Everybody is using ADUs. Much easier to say, too.
I agree.
Okay.
Good. So we're thinking, Carrie, of meeting Wednesday or Friday next week?
Yeah, Wednesday all day. There's pretty much any time, or was it when were people free? Let's see. It was Friday afternoons, I think, or Wednesday anytime all day. Were the choices?
Okay. All right. We can take care of that offline.
Yeah, I'll work it out with the people who should be there. Okay. Gives me a deadline too, which is good.
Let me just mention that I've been talking with Ron Friedson. He's the guy that had the two lots, one at Shoreham Terrace and one at St. Mortar. And I've asked him to take a look at the accessory dwelling unit regs, thinking that maybe there's a way that he could do a 2-unit structure, a house with an accessory dwelling unit.
Mm-hmm.
So I will continue to talk with Ron because I think that he's an experienced, reasonable guy dealing with small structures, and it's good to get feedback. So, okay. Good. Just again, the meeting with Planning and Zoning is going to be before our next monthly meeting. And I request that as many people who can come to the meeting on the 27th at Planning and Zoning. Mark, you don't have any sense if we'd be first up or last up?
I haven't seen the agenda yet, but it's going to be a fairly short agenda. I think we'll probably be one of the main events, if not the main event.
Oh, Mark, are they going to require? I mean, like they usually do, accept it for a public hearing, and then it goes to the next meeting.
Yeah, they already did.
Okay.
They've already accepted it, referred it to a public hearing, and now I've been working with Jim to schedule a public hearing date.
Okay.
Originally, we thought it might be in November, but he has an opening in his calendar and asked if we would fill it.
And so, are you encouraging us, Mark, to talk to people like Operation Hope and church groups or other people to gain more support, or do you think that we have enough support with the Affordable Housing Committee and the Fairfield Senior Advocates?
I don't think I never think you have enough support. So more is always better. I don't know that they necessarily have to speak, but they can certainly send a letter in support if they feel so comfortable, or an email just to register their support for increasing opportunities to create accessory dwelling units. I mean, I think we should do all that. Yeah, for sure.
All of that, and I think we're going to have to do some of it on social media through groups like Facebook Preserve, Fairfield's group, and there are a couple of other Fairfield groups there, and Fairfield Senior Advocates can post that on those sites, or we can share it to those sites.
Yeah, just make sure that you've got folks that are obviously simpatico with your objectives here.
No, on Preserve Fairfield, I've seen people talking about that would be better than what we have, which are the big 830G units. So, I think
so we could talk about that next week too, Carrie. But I think it's a good idea to get that support. And Mark, the Jim or the commission look upon emails and letters both as show of support or opposition. I mean, you don't have to be there in person, right?
You don't have to be there. No.
Yeah. Okay.
In some ways, having people just say the same thing over and over again is I don't know if it's helpful. So, but to have different groups weigh in on it and say this is a good thing, we should be doing something like this. I don't think that hurts.
People like Carla and Carol.
Mm-hmm.
If you can think of anybody else, Mark, that maybe we should nudge, please let us know. Okay.
This is Sheila. Can I ask Carrie one more question?
Sure.
Sorry, Carrie. The actual freestanding ADUs, there's nothing. There's not a requirement to make them affordable, right? To meet the affordable regs, right? So somebody could we're just opening it up for. You're suggesting they open it up for people who are in zoned residential zones AAA, and they can build it. They don't have to rent it at affordable, or they don't have to rent it at all.
They can use it for anything they want as long as they conform with the existing regulations and then the size regulations that will be adopted by the commission. I put in 1,000 square feet there, and we'll see if that stands or whether they want to make it smaller. I doubt if they would make it larger, but these would be available. Now, Jim told me they heard support for this type of thing at the POCD discussions that we had before COVID came along. So I think people are now looking at this. It doesn't mean I think we'll get a lot, maybe, 2 or 3 over the course of a year, but it's again, as Steve said, more options for people.
Right, but it doesn't necessarily mean people are going to make it affordable. So it would be misleading to use the word affordable a lot. I mean, it might be affordable in their budget, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to count towards any kind of affordability unit point.
And that's,
so, because, that's why I asked the question is I wanted to be sure that that's what you meant.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good point, Sheila. Yes.
Yeah, it is.
We need to be careful about, and I'm also assuming that we're not going to give town or trust fund dollars unless it is an affordable unit.
Correct.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yes.
How does everybody else feel about that? I think that came up in our discussion, and I just wanted to be sure that that's what we were all in agreement on that.
I think everyone is in agreement.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Moving along. Old business and updates. Moratorium status. That would be you, Mark. Yeah.
There's not really a whole lot of change. I included that in your packet. The only change from the month before is that 528 Black Rock Turnpike was approved additionally. And 131 Beach Road, the hearing was closed last evening, and they have not yet made a decision. I don't anticipate that it would probably be on the agenda for the 27th for a decision either to carry.
What was the Black Rock one that was approved?
528 Al Camerata's project on 528 Black Rock Turnpike. I think it was 23 units.
Right down at the circle area there?
Yeah, exactly.
Bottom of the hill? Yeah.
Yep.
And how many units was that?
I think it was 23 if memory serves.
I'm just looking. I don't see it on the list. Is it on the list?
It should be under approved. That's the only change. It went up to the approved category.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Top,
I see it.
Top,
okay. Yeah.
Top third.
Yep. All right. 15 Umpqua. Anything happening there? That's still proposed.
It still requires some work. 5545 Park Avenue was referred last evening to public hearing. It is not being proposed. I think it's not being proposed as a set-aside development. They're actually proposing a reg amendment and slightly less units. So we'll see how that goes. But that was on the agenda last night for referral to a public hearing.
And when you say proposed on these 6 developments that are proposed, does that mean they've submitted stuff to the town or they've just been talking?
It means submitted in one form or another because a lot of these, their first step is Water Pollution Control Authority. And so typically that's our first indication they might be contemplating a project. They get a sewer use permit, as part of their review, and then we usually have code review and then an application of TP&Z, which may be preceded by inland wetlands, depending on whether or not there's wetlands on the property.
And which one is the plant factory? Is that 4480?
There are probably two on here. There's one 4221 to 4267, which is the larger project that's on top of the rock, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then 4185 is the actual plant factory site, which abuts Black Rock Turnpike, a little commercial strip there across from the high hill.
Well, wait, I'm sorry. 4221, is that on basically the same site but on top of the hill?
Yeah.
Oh.
Exactly.
Ooh. So
that is
almost 350 units.
That's more speculative than others, because while they have presented that to WPCA, it hasn't moved forward in terms of any code review or inland wetlands application. So it's still in the preliminary stages, I would say.
And the 4480 Black Rock is the one further up on the same side as Hi-Ho, but further up.
Right, down the slope.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that project and the top of the rock, 4221, are both very, very preliminary. I've gone through initial review with WPCA, but that's pretty much it.
Mark, this is Helene. Speaking of WPCA, I think they had a property at 888 Oldfield Road go before them. Do you know anything about that and what the status is of that?
I don't. I do know of it, but I don't know the current status. Whether that was approved or not.
Do you know if that was proposed to be an 830G?
I don't believe it was.
No. Okay.
I may be mistaken. I will check on it, Helene, and get back to all of you.
Okay.
It was 888.
888, yeah, Oldfield.
Yeah. Okay.
Chris Coco, he's also got the property right behind the police station too.
Right.
Okay. And if you had to guess when we would have enough points for the moratorium, 12 months out, maybe 18.
Yeah, I would say at least 12 months.
Yeah.
A lot of these projects in construction, when you have in development, that includes not only units in construction but approved that haven't yet started any meaningful work, and so we're going to need some of those to push across the finish line, absent something that we get from somewhere else. So again, the best option would be to acquire existing housing and deed restrict it, or do something along those lines. Deed restrict existing housing, because you would get the benefit of it right from the start if you could restrict it for 40 years. But that kind of limits the universe of people that would want to work with you, I think, to probably nonprofits.
Hey, Mark.
I was up. I'm sorry, go ahead,
please.
All right. Well, I was at a development in Wilton a couple of weeks ago. Connecticut Housing Partners has an apartment complex up there that's affordable, but they also have affordable assisted living. And it would be great to get one of those. Is that possible? Could we get it through low-income housing tax credit deal? Was that a one-off, a black swan kind of development that you're never going to see again? Do you know anything about it?
This is in Bethel?
No, Wilton, right at the train station.
Okay. I heard that Bethel had done something with an assisted living provider to have some units that were affordable, considered affordable. I'm not sure how they would do that, because a lot of the cost obviously is associated with the care component.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think it is definitely worth looking into. I think at the time when we had the applications from assisted living providers, the determination was made by zoning that our reg amendment did not cover, because it was a different section of the regs that covered it, did not extend to the accessory or to the assisted living providers in terms of the inclusionary zoning requirement.
How about dorms? Do our regs cover dorms too?
No. At the university?
Yeah. No, they put up
We
a
do
40 dorm.
We do get money.
Have to be affordable. Just a thought. Okay.
With their $60,000 tuition bill or whatever.
Yeah, 60 or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all the old business I have. Any new business? Well, right, hearing none, then we can close the meeting. The next meeting is on November 11th. Remember to vote. And Carrie and Cindy and Sheila and I have a little bit of homework to do between now and the next meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, okay.
I'll try to. We'll try to do that and pass around something beforehand for comments.
Yes.
Okay, that's great.
Okay. Thank
all
you
right,
all.
guys. Thank you.
Have a good night. Vote.
Good night. Yep.
Bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
We didn't vote to adjourn.
Oh.
So move.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
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 We are adjourned at 8:36 p.m. Thank you all.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, thanks.
Have a
All
good
right.
night.
Bye-bye.